Hello and welcome to the very first episode of Rogues Raving, the random thoughts of a gamer. I am Rogue Avatar, and this is why I think the Final Fantasy VII Remake is an impossible task. Forget the fact that this remake is really happening for a moment, and let's look at it from the developer's point of view. Frankly, I don't envy Square Enix. Not so much the company, but the poor buggers who have to actually sit down and make the Final Fantasy VII Remake. There's a lot to get through as to why, so let's get started. Graphics. First up in the multitude of problems the devs will have to deal with, it's the graphics. The original Final Fantasy VII has three distinct types of aesthetic, if you will. The first up, there's the overworld, where players spend the majority of their time. Here the characters are little chibi-sized versions of themselves and the backgrounds are all pre-rendered and mostly static. Then there's combat, where the characters are relatively realistically proportioned, and there's a vaguely 3D-ish background while they're doing the fighting. Finally, there's the cutscenes, where the characters are realistically proportioned again, but with much higher detail. Apart from in some cutscenes where they're not and still in their GB-ish forms because reasons. So, with that in mind, how do you replicate that in a remake? The cutscenes are easy enough, just use the style from the Final Fantasy VII film Advent Children. This is the style we saw in the trailer. In combat, perhaps you could use the same again, maybe with slightly less detail or more detail. But what about the backgrounds? Do you create whole new 3D ones to go around them? I don't know. Then, and perhaps with the most issues, is the overworld. Do you keep the static viewpoint and pre-rendered style backgrounds and risk making everything look flat and boring by today's standards? Do you remake each and every area in full 3D and risk losing the charm of the originals as well as the Herculean task of actually recreating it all? On top of that, do you keep the small chibi style characters? Would it make sense if all the characters weren't looking like they did in Advent Children as they are the rest of the time, assuming they are looking like that the rest of the time? This all ties up with gameplay. So, while playing the game in the overworld, there's mostly a lot of wandering, talking and picking stuff up. It sounds silly, but when you break it down, that's what you're doing in most JRPGs. With the original pre-rendered backgrounds, this was relatively easy. You could see the whole or a large portion of the area you're in and act accordingly. If this changed to a full 3D world, it's going to be a lot harder to find stuff simply because you won't be able to see as much all in one go. This is of course dependent on the viewpoint they use. This will also make the world seem incredibly empty, unless of course there's much more detail and more stuff thrown in. But is that in keeping with a true remake? Would it change the feel of the game too much? These are some tricky questions the developer has to answer. Then of course, there's the battle system, classic turn-based combat. Nothing added, nothing taken away. If they change it, there will be uproar. If they leave it exactly the same, they risk alienating a new audience that the game more than likely needs in order to be a success. On top of this, the materia system is a fun metagame, but rather obtuse comparative to the simple system younger gamers are perhaps used to. It's the same problem. Change it. Uproar. Tweak it. No one's happy. Leave it as it is. Those who've never played it before just won't get it. This is of course not to mention the various mini-games the original has, particularly the motorcycle chase, snowboarding and chocobo racing. How will they be implemented? Could Square Enix dare to leave them out? I don't think so. Soundtrack and audio. Next up, it's the sound and music. The music from Final Fantasy VII is iconic. Like it or loathe it, you damn well know it. Does the game offer the original soundtrack at a higher quality, or re-record the whole thing with an orchestra? That's a whole lot of money to spend right there. Then comes the biggest sound problem. Do you have audio dialogue or not? The safe way to play this would be no, and leave the text boxes intact. But again, will that wash with a new audience, and would the fans happy with their heroes not being fully brought to life as they've already seen them that way in Advent Children? Plot. Final Fantasy VII's plot is relatively simple. Good dudes fight some bad dudes who want to rule the planet. Then later, good dudes fight one dude who wants to wreck the planet because mummy issues. It's the bits in between that are the really tricky bit. Like the whole sequence in Cloud's head, or is it in the live stream that reveal him to be not who he says it is, or some kind of clone? I don't know, I'm not really sure to this day. Cait Sith, what is he? Who is he? Why is he? You don't find out without a lot of digging. Also, Yuffie and Vincent. They both have extended side stories that you can completely miss if you're not looking for them. like I did on my first playthrough. Shame on me! The Honeybee Inn, cross-dressing, you know what I'm talking about. Stop snickering at the back. There's so many weird little asides and bits and secrets and side quests in the original, and plenty of it doesn't even make sense to all but the most hardcore of fans. Take any of it out for the sake of clarity or brevity, and you'll upset someone. So, do you remake it shot for shot as it were, or simply stay true to the main plot points? Size and style. As I've hinted, the makers of this remake, much as I hate that sentence, have a horrible task ahead. Final Fantasy VII is a huge game, and there's just no getting away from that. To remake it from the ground up for modern consoles, which they will almost certainly have to do, is an insane undertaking. There's so many questions over style and content, how can they possibly hope to put it all back in? Which leads nicely to cost. Remaking Final Fantasy VII is something fans have been wanting for a long time. For the reasons outlined previously though, it should be pretty obvious why Square Enix has avoided doing one up until now. It's going to cost millions upon millions to do it quote unquote right. It's everything. Graphics, gameplay, sound and music, plot, style. I almost can't believe they're actually doing it. I know why they're doing it, because they're trying to please the fans. The Final Fantasy VII Remake is pure fan service no matter how you look at it. And in this day and age, fans are absolute bastards. They're fickle, they're whiny, and they're loud, especially about being fickle and whiny. You will simply never please them, no matter what you do. It's a sad fact of life that people will complain about the things they love the most, and you can be sure a lot of people love Final Fantasy VII. And thusly, you can be sure that people are going to whine and complain like hell about it, no matter what the outcome. There is of course the Monkey Island option, where you have the remake and at the push of a button you can return to the original in all its glory. Wouldn't that be lovely? And it would eliminate a lot of the style problems I've outlined above. Never gonna happen! Logistically and practically, never gonna happen! Closing thoughts. I'm excited for the Final Fantasy VII Remake. It's a game that, despite my last few minutes of ranting, I do truly love. I just hope that Square Enix doesn't bankrupt itself making it. I've been Rogue Avatar. Like and subscribe for more. See you next time. Ciao!